Resources allocation problem. The goal of the resource allocation problem is to find an optimal allocation of a fixed amount of resources to activities while minimizing the cost of the allocation. The simplest form of the problem is to minimize a separable convex function while keeping a single constraint on the total amount of resources to be allocated in mind. Depending on the circumstances, the amount of resources to be allocated to each activity is treated as a continuous or integer variable. This is a subset of the nonlinear programming problem or the nonlinear integer programming problem. So what is resource allocation? Resource allocation is another way to speak of resource management or resource scheduling, which is the scheduling of tasks and the associated resources that those tasks requires to be completed. Part of resource allocation is knowing the availability of your resources and scheduling them to coincide with your project timeline. When allocating resources, it can be for the project or non-project activities, such as administration, supports, operations, and etc. These resources can be either fully or partially available, which has to be taken into account when scheduling resources. When the project scope changes or project requirements change, resource allocation must also pivot to accommodate these changes. The relationship between progress, time, and resource availability usage is very important. Schedules should be evaluated not merely in terms of meeting project milestones, but also in terms of the timing and use of scarce resources. A fundamental measure of the PM success in project management is the skill with which the trade-offs among performance, time, and cost are managed. It is a continuous process of cost-benefit analysis. Occasionally, it is possible that some additional but useful resources can be added a little or no cost to a project during a crisis period. At other times, some resources in abundant supply may be traded for scarce ones. Most of the time, however, these trades entail additional costs to the organization, so a primary responsibility for the PM is to make to do with what is available, or PM or project management. As difficult as it might be to allocate resources correctly over the life cycle of a project, it's an essential part of any true project management plan and should be done in the planning stage of a project. This helps keep costs down, maximize productivity, and helps with team morale, as well as facilitates client satisfaction by achieving the best outcome and successfully delivering the project. With the resource loading. Resource loading is a project management technique that involves filling team members' total available time with assignments over the course of a work week. Project managers typically assign team members a percentage of a project or objective per day until they reach 100% of their weekly work capacity. When a team member's capacity reaches 100%, the project manager usually begins assigning tasks to other employees. Allocating equipment and other resources required for project completion is also part of resource loading. So, resource loading in project management is the process of loading employees' total available hours with assignments. In resource loading, an employee will typically be assigned a percentage of a project and can then be assigned additional project percentage until that employee reach 100% of their hourly work week capacity. Once an employee reaches 100%, they are effectively booked and should not be scheduled for more work. By looking at a resource loading chart, a manager can view the total hours Their employees can work for a given time period and adjust each team member's assignments accordingly. Factors that influence resource loading. Here are some factors that may influence resource loading. Profitable utilization. Similarly, forecasting profitable resource utilization is the ratio between profitable demand forecast and total resource capacity. These utilizations are mostly measured in percentage. A limited or strict budget, skill set requirements, type of works required, administration control. Resource labeling is a project management technique that entails resolving overallocation or scheduling conflicts in order to ensure that a project can be completed with the resources that are available. The time, materials, or tools required to complete a project are examples of resources. The goal of resource labeling is to maximize available resources while remaining inside the project's time, cost, and scope constraints. So, sometimes projects don't always go as planned. You may encounter resource shortage and have to find ways to adapt to ensure project deliverables aren't affected. That's where resource labeling comes in. It allows you to readjust timelines so that a project can be finished with the available resources. With this technique, you can allocate resources accordingly to ensure goals and objectives are met. Resource leveling requires solid resource management skills and true understanding of what each project needs. To help you get a better handle on this technique, we will find out what is resource leveling in project management. Resource leveling is a project management technique that involves resolving overallocation or scheduling conflicts to ensure project can be completed with available resources. So depending on your team needs here and possible outcomes, if the goal is to keep the current project deadline, more resources may need to be made available. If the goal is to run the project with currently available resources, the deadline of the project may be extended. When to use resource leveling? Resource leveling prevents resources from being spread too thin while ensuring projects still have what they need to succeed. This technique contributes to not only project management but also helps maintain work-life balance for the team. Here are some reasons why your team can benefit from resource leveling. To optimize your resources, resource leveling lets you get the most out of the resource you have on hand. It helps you assess which projects should receive additional resources and which ones are flexible in terms of deadlines. Resource leveling can be difficult for project managers because it requires balancing the demand for the same resources across multiple projects. Resource leveling adjusts resource allocation or project schedules to prevent resources from being overstressed. This can help to maintain project output quality. Resource leveling adjusts resource allocation of project schedules to keep resource from being overextended. This can help to keep project outputs of high quality. So, to prevent task overloading, overallocation of resources leads to overwork, which can be overwhelming for team members. Resource leveling prevents this by resolving overallocation issues and adjusting deadlines to ensure team members don't have too much on their plates. So to minimize resource leveling prevents significant project delays, thereby minimizing the losses in cost and labor. This technique allows you to manage the resource demand without exceeding the company's current capacity and financial resources. And that's all. Thank you.